I bought the place at the end of 2016 and I knew it was in a flood zone. I'm a low-income earner and my choices were limited in terms of affordable housing in Lismore.
In 2017, Lismore was inundated by an 11.6 metre flood, the worst in more than 40 years. Almost a foot of water went through Jo Grove's home. After that, she received a grant to help elevate her property well above a 1 in 100 year flood event. It's now 4 metres off the ground.
I believed that raising the house would make it flood safe. We raised it to that level because that was the maximum level that we were legally allowed to go at the time.
But this February, an even higher flood devastated Lismore, topping the level of the worst-case scenario predicted just once every 100 years.
Oh, God. I had 1.25 metres of water through my home. I was insured for the 2017 flood, but after that the premiums were so high that they were unaffordable. So I have no flood insurance.
There's a little moment of joy, hey?
Around the country, houses are built to avoid a flood that's expected, on average, once a century. That guide is built into the planning rules of state governments and local councils.
It's a statistical model to help risk planners who are responsible for where people live, how their homes are constructed.
Greg Mullins used to be the boss of New South Wales Fire and Rescue, as well as the association that represents all emergency services in Australia.
And in reality, as we saw recently in Brisbane and Lismore, you might get 3 in 3 weeks.
Floods that go beyond the 1 in 100 year level, like the one that occurred this year in Lismore, have been considered rare enough that for some types of infrastructure, it's a risk that's okay to take. But climate scientists say those calculated risks are no longer accurate.
It's actually a 1 in 100 year event.
This is a natural disaster of unprecedented proportions.
This is an unprecedented event.
We keep getting told these events are like unprecedented, once in a lifetime, but they seem to happen with alarming regularity.
Climate scientists have been providing these sorts of warnings about the increasing impact of climate extremes for more than 2 decades.
David Caroli was until this year head of the Climate Science Centre at the National Science Agency, the CSIRO. He says we need to work out how frequently such disasters return.
Those return periods are essentially worthless now because we know that the return periods, for instance, for extreme rainfall or flooding, is based on out-of-date historical data.
We're flying blind. We don't know what to expect.
Experts say a major investment is needed in the type of tools that could help avoid the catastrophe that occurred here in Kinglake more than a decade ago. On the 8th of February 2009, a fire roared into the forests here. Flames reached more than 30 metres into the air. The Forest Fire Danger Index was literally off the charts. The fire weather so extreme, a new category of danger had to be created. It took weeks for the fires to be put out. 120 people lost their lives in this area alone.
The Black Saturday bushfires were made significantly worse by climate change.
The Royal Commission into the wildfires which caused devastation from Queensland to Victoria in the summer of 2020 recommended the Commonwealth, state and territory governments work together to fix the knowledge gap, producing tools called downscaled climate projections that better predict what sorts of disasters to expect in the future and where.
Topographic influences, coastal influences, extreme rainfall events all require high spatial resolution information. We can only get that using downscaling that takes the global scale information down to the local scale.
To get those projections, existing climate models need to be run at greater resolution than has previously been done. That takes a lot of time on supercomputers, and that will cost tens of millions of dollars. In 2014, the Productivity Commission estimated that 97% of disaster funding goes into recovery, with only 3% going into mitigating those disasters.
It's a recipe for disaster, quite literally a disaster.
Robert Glasser used to be the United Nations Special Representative for Disaster Risk Reduction and now works at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.
These disasters are estimated to increase in cost to something like 39 billion, even without climate change. With climate change, it'll be far more. And that's pretty much what Australia spends currently on our entire defence budget.
The lack of knowledge about likely extreme weather is also pushing up insurance costs around the country.
There are some properties that are now becoming uninsurable.
In the wake of the Black Summer bushfires, the Morrison government set up a virtual agency that appeared to satisfy the Royal Commission's recommendation to produce downscaled climate projections.
It has seen us invest $209 million to establish the Australian Climate Service to help us better anticipate, manage and adapt to the impacts of natural disasters and climate change.
Temperature variations or flow over a mountain.
But the Royal Commission was clear. It should be a collaboration between the federal government and the states.
So we only had 30 years of records up to that period.
Professor Caroli's work at the CSIRO helped shape the Royal Commission's recommendation.
The states need to be involved right at every stage in the planning of future climate projections and the understanding of the impacts, because the states are where all of the, if you like, emergency management activity happens.
But when the Australian Climate Service was set up, it was made answerable to two agencies, both of which report to the Commonwealth's Department of Home Affairs.
During the bushfires, Scott Morrison justified his trip to Hawaii at the height of the fires by saying, it's a state and territory responsibility, not my job. Well, my job's to try and work out what's happening with these fires, and if I don't have the data, if that's held in a government department that's not responsible for doing that, what good is it?
In a written statement, a coalition spokesman said this type of work cannot be done alone and pointed out that National Cabinet has already agreed for the Australian and all state and territory governments to work together to share data and disaster risk information. That was an in-principle agreement from last year, and the government didn't clarify how or when states would get access to the data.
We need that information yesterday, not 10 years in the future.
Back at the clean-up, Joe Groves is grappling with what to do next.
I feel sorry.
And she no longer wants to grow old in her own home.
You know, this was going to be my forever home, and I can't do it again. You know, I have to go.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.